Hello and welcome to Inside Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. I'm your host, Lin Neumann. Today we're talking with Ruici Tio, who is the marketing manager for MTV Exit, which is not what it sounds like. MTV Exit, it reminds me, here you are at MTV and then there's the exit. Your video's not going to be shown.
No, not on the way out, but so the exit's actually shorthand for end exploitation and trafficking.
Right. MTV Exit is the kind of social arm of MTV and works on human trafficking and exploitation of women and children and others.
That's correct. Right? Yeah, we're one of the three global campaigns, one of the three global pro-social campaigns that's a part of MTV. Now what we do is we're an awareness raising project, and we use media to raise awareness about this issue and the power of celebrity. So the ways we do that are through concerts, through documentaries, different on-air programming, PSAs, music videos, etc., as well as through digital and youth engagement.
No, MTV Exit is an international thing, not just in Asia.
That's correct.
So this campaign, for example, to try and end exploitation and trafficking, this is worldwide.
Correct. We started in Europe in 2004. Since 2006, we've been in Asia. We've done 30 concerts to date. We've done over 100 programs in 14 languages in Asia, but we've also just recently launched in Latin America and Russia as well.
Now you just recently had, and the way I heard about this was through your Bandung concert. You just had a big concert in Bandung. Tell us about that event.
Well, so September 1st was MTV Exit Live in Bandung. We had about 25,000 people that came out to support the cause. They came out to see their favorite artists. We had some of the biggest Indonesian artists.
Who was there? Who performed?
We had The Massive, the Chunk Shooters, Bondan Fade to Black, Rosemary's a local Bandung band, as well as Pas Band. And they're a long-time favorite that came together for the show. And that concert was also live to air on global TV. So we've got the audience on the ground. We're engaging with in terms of messaging and getting the message about anti-trafficking and what you can do out there, as well as through TV.
So when you do one of these concerts, this is a pretty well-established genre now, the kind of social good concert. So the artists are clued in on the issue, they discuss it, and hopefully get across to a younger audience. What the problem is.
Exactly, and that's what we tried to do. So what we're doing is creating a platform for this issue. We use the power of celebrity to bring people in, and what differentiates us from other sort of social campaigns is that we also have an on-the-ground component in terms of staying on the ground and doing roadshow activities, engaging with young people to get them to take action against this issue.
So you have ongoing activities on the ground in Indonesia. What kind of stuff goes on here?
Well, I'll give you sort of an overview in terms of the arc of an MTV Exit campaign. Right? We've got the concert, it's got the celebrity power, it brings the media attention, it brings together NGOs, governments, as well as celebrities and young people around this issue. From the concert, we go to the documentary, which also aired on global TV. That's hosted by Dian Sastro. And that's our hard-hitting educational program.
Now, the documentary is called Enslaved, right?
Correct.
That will be shown elsewhere?
It will be. The roadshow, which is the third part of our campaign, will go out throughout the country and do screenings in local communities. This is our way at reaching out to at-risk communities. We go in there, and we show the documentary. We engage with young people in the local community and do educational sort of awareness-raising projects throughout. And then we do things with the youth leaders there to get them to continue to carry that torch.
Now, Enslaved, the documentary, what exactly does that cover? Is that just about Indonesia?
Yes, so what actually, the way we started, the first documentary we did was called Traffic. That was in 2006, or sorry, 2008. That was hosted by Lucy Liu. Now that was a pan-regional version in it that it showed 3 stories, one from Indonesia and the Philippines. And so that was dubbed into local language with a local celebrity host. But what we found was that using a pan-regional program wasn't necessarily as effective as having one that was completely localized. So this Indonesian
Is it because people just relate more to their own country?
Exactly. I mean, on the one hand, you have an issue that while you have sort of universal sort of push and pull factors that allow it to continue, you also have very local, cultural, and context-specific things that determine how this issue affects people's lives. Right? And so what we're trying to do is to capture exactly what those trends are, what's happening in a place like Indonesia, what are the messages that need to get out there, because you have differences between source, destination, and transit countries. So the documentary is fully Indonesian, and it shows testimonials from 3 Indonesian survivors. And then we have local NGO representative, as well as a government representative, and of course the local celebrity ambassador.
Okay, and so the Indonesian government is supportive of this. Did the minister? Is it Minister of Women's Empowerment? Or,
correct, yeah, so Menko Kesra for short. And we work very closely with the Indonesian government, as well as our donors, USA, AUSAID, and ASEAN, in fact.
Right.
So it's about bringing these partners together around this issue and providing a platform actually for the good work that they're doing as well.
Well, and it's a region-wide issue, so it is something that, quite correctly, ASEAN should get involved in. USAID did the initial funding, part of the initial funding for this, right?
Correct.
Which makes sense since MTV is an American company, so I can see all the partnerships coming together. We're almost out of time for this segment. When we come back, I want to talk about the issue itself and try and strip away some of the mystery behind what we mean by trafficking. You're watching Insight Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. Today we're talking with Ruici Tio from MTV Exit. Stay with us. Welcome back to Insight Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. Today we're talking with Ruici Tio from MTV Exit, which is MTV's social arm and works very much in Indonesia on anti-trafficking and exploitation. Ruici, when we talk about trafficking, the instant image that comes to mind is women trafficked into sexual bondage, slavery, exploitation of some kind.
Yeah.
Is that still the center of the problem, or how do we look at this problem these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, because on the one hand, yes, it's still very much a big part of the problem. You know, when you're talking about trafficking, you are talking about sex trafficking. But the thing is that trafficking is also about labor trafficking, about child exploitation, about domestic servitude. You know, and those are three things that are happening, and they're happening here in Indonesia. Globally, you have the estimates range from 2.5 million victims to 27 million victims of human trafficking. Most of those are young people, and almost half of them are in Asia Pacific. And so you have an issue that's very much pertinent here, and it's a place where there's a culture of moving abroad for work, or moving to the big city for work to find opportunities. So really, you know, in a place like Indonesia, that's very much a source country as well as a transit country. It's about messages of safe migration. You know, and there's a very basic things, because people are tricked into vulnerable situations.
How does that happen? I mean, how do women who don't do this voluntarily, because there are people who enter that kind of work voluntarily, of course, but there are many, many millions of women who don't, but get tricked. What do they have to watch out for? What fools them into thinking they found this pot of gold, and then they end up in a brutal condition?
Well, that's exactly it. It's the promise of a better life, the promise of a higher salary that lures people into these situations. And what happens is, when they end up in places, you know, whether that's Malaysia or the Middle East, you know, they lose recourse in the sense that they've maybe given up their passport, they've given up their phone, so they have no way of contacting someone for help. You know, when they arrive there, they're told, well, you now owe us this much for travel costs, for your accommodation cost, for your food, and your salary is going to be deducted this amount. And you end up being indebted. You know, it's what we call indebted servitude, right? And so there's, for them to pay that back, they now have to work, you know, for the next 5-10 years, if even then. You know.
Well, this is the classic story, and it happens over and over again. It happens in New York City with Chinese workers who get trafficked into the city, and then suddenly find that they don't get any wages for 6 or 8 months, or longer, because they owe the snakeheads, right? Money to get them to pay off their voyage, which they didn't even know they were going to owe at the time.
Exactly, and that's the basic message, right? If it sounds too good to be true, it may be, and find out, you know, find out as much information as you can, because there are resources available to you. The government has a hotline number you can call if you have questions, and it's basic things. I mean, we basically preach 3 key safe messages for safe migration. Right? The first is don't trust everyone, as in don't trust anyone that comes along and says, you know, I've got this great job, you should, you know, come with me, I'll take you to X, Y, and Z. Secondly, it's not giving up your possessions, you know, like your cell phone, like your passport, because your passport is your lifeline. You know, without that, you can't get out of a country.
But unfortunately, one of the problems, and this happens even in Hong Kong and Singapore, I know, is that women who have legitimate work contracts with legitimate employment agencies, not under a trafficking situation by most standards, still employment agents will take the passport for a certain period of time.
That's correct. I mean, like, and there are processes in place, you know, but I think...
Which I know violates the UN rules and everything else, but it does happen.
Yeah, it does happen, right? And you're talking about a situation that's quite competitive in terms of trying to get a job in a place like Hong Kong. I think what we're trying to preach is that, you know, when you're first being approached by a recruiter, you know, or by someone acting as an agent or that may be an agent, is that you need to be careful. You need to find out information before you willingly give up documentation.
And so are you able to get that message down to the mass level? Because a lot of the women who would end up in this situation are at most school graduates, probably not even high school graduates. Some of them barely literate even. Out in the kampungs. You know, this is a world far away from Jakarta. Can you get them? How do you get the message down at that level?
Well, look, on the one hand, you know, we're a mass media campaign. You know, the events that we do, the documentary, it airs on a free TV channel. You know, so it's reaching to millions of people. But what we are more than that is a platform for everyone that's working on this issue, right? And that's the local NGOs, that's the government, and that's what we're here for, is to bring a spotlight and help to bring attention to this issue. And the local NGOs, you know, they are the ones that are on the front lines. They're the ones that are providing services, rehabilitation, that are taking in survivors. You know, so we want to make sure that their work is being promoted if they have resources, hotline numbers, etc., because they will know a local area better than any of us ever will.
We're going to have to take a break here. When we come back, I want to talk about what's being done and where we stand on some of the legal remedies that we've been waiting for in Indonesia. You're watching Insight Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. Stay with us. Welcome back to Insight Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. Today we're talking about trafficking and exploitation with Ruici Tio from MTV Exit, the social arm of MTV. We talked about some of the dimensions of trafficking and the problem in Indonesia in the last segment. What about domestic trafficking? Because that's also an issue, and in many ways, much more complicated issue to understand in this country anyway.
Yes, I mean, that's right. I mean, when you talk about external trafficking, you know, that's something that's slightly easier to peg statistics to, you know, because people that are leaving through legal means, you know, there's a way to track that. Of course, there are many people that are also leaving through illegal, you know, means. But when you're talking about domestic trafficking,
when you get on a bus in Indramayu,
exactly, no one's checking a box saying, you know, person X has gone from here to work here. Right now, and so when you're talking about domestic trafficking, it is a much more complicated issue. But what we are seeing is, you know, a lot of trafficking for domestic servitude, for labor, as well as for sex.
And are there I have to assume, but there are actual organized syndicates that go out into the kampungs and looking for certain types of either men or women, depending upon what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's certainly a growth in that, you know, in terms of whether you want to call them mafias or whether you want to call them syndicates. I mean, there are very much organized methods, you know, by which people are recruited, deceived, and exploited.
So this is, and you said there's a growth in this.
Yeah.
So the problem is getting worse.
It's a growing problem, and the thing is, most people associate trafficking with those that don't have options or opportunities. And so it's those that are, you know, in the most poverty-stricken areas that are most vulnerable. But what we're finding is that those individuals that come from communities where there is upward mobility, they also are vulnerable to being trafficked, because the allure of going from, you know, one socioeconomic level and being able to move to the next is that much stronger.
You can get rid of that old cell phone, and pretty soon you'll have a BlackBerry and a Louis Vuitton bag.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but
no, but it happens.
Exactly.
I know it happens. I know it does. the government of Indonesia has in the past been criticized for being less than vigilant in the way it looks after its migrant workers and this issue. Is there any kind of improvement in the consciousness at the government level?
Well, I certainly can't speak in terms of the government sort of report card. There are other agencies. The U.S. government releases a tip report every year to assess that. And what we know from working with the government is that they're extremely supportive of this. They've launched a hotline number. They passed an anti-trafficking bill. When we work with the government, there's the Gugus Tugas is the anti-trafficking community of ministries that work together on this issue to make sure that they're not only addressing it on a national level, but also on a local level. Because it's on a local level where you're talking about sort of these key areas where you can really make a difference. The local police need to be able to identify individuals that are coming back to the community, that are survivors of trafficking, or those, the recruiters that are coming in to actually, exploit people.
And I have to assume also that the biggest issue in Indonesia, corruption, also plays a role.
Certainly. I think there's a long history of let's say, an intertwinement of interests that allow trafficking, sex and labor trafficking to persist. And that, runs the gamut from small syndicates to involvement by other larger structures.
Other larger structures. Involvement by other larger structures. That's well put. Yes, the mysterious other structures.
The larger
no, but the tragedy is that we talk about corruption sometimes as a kind of an abstract thing that only involves shaking down foreign investors or something. But at this level, at the lower levels, it really compounds human tragedy.
It does, exactly, because if you can't trust the police, if you can't trust local government and go to them and say, A, there's someone that's being trafficked, or B, I need help, or C, can you help me figure out if this situation is real? If you don't have that, and you don't have resources, then that area is going to be more vulnerable to that deception.
What can individuals now do to join into a campaign like this to try and make things better?
Well, look, the first thing is about raising awareness. We're an MTV campaign. That means our demographic is young people, but it's also young people that A, are being trafficked, and B, that we feel can really make a difference on this issue. One, in terms of telling people that A, it's happening, B, that they can take a stand by sharing information. Did you know, that you shouldn't give up your passport, you shouldn't, give up your belongings, that, these things are happening. And 3, you're talking about a country that is on the cusp of being one of the biggest digital players in the globe. So we want to harness that momentum and use the power of digital to get the message out there and young people to talk about this and promote what they're doing in their local community.
And so as Indonesia gets better organized as well, the growth of NGOs, et cetera, I get the sense that more people are getting involved in this issue and becoming more aware of it.
Yep, absolutely.
And which is something that's happened a long time ago in the Philippines, where there's a lot of involvement by NGOs in this kind of thing. And I almost get the impression that Indonesia is starting to learn from the Philippines and elsewhere about how to address some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Philippines is a country we work in as well, and obviously trafficking is still an issue there. But on the other hand, you also have very clear channels by which people can find work abroad or in the city, and so there is a consciousness about that issue, a willingness to talk about what's happening. That's what we're trying to foster here in Indonesia as well, is to help continue that dialogue. So it's easy to talk about the issue, and if you are trafficked and you come back to your community, there isn't a stigma attached to that, and you can actually talk about your experience and prevent others from being trafficked.
We're just out of time, but I want to thank you for the work you're doing. Folks, take a look at mtvexit.org. You can find out more information about the trafficking campaign there. The website is up on your screen. You've been watching Inside Indonesia, brought to you by the Jakarta Globe. We're seen on live streaming on Berita Satu TV and beritasatu.com and online at thejakartaglobe.com. Thank you for watching.
Are among the most cherished and vulnerable in any culture. Yet many suffer under great abuse, and some are intentionally exploited. Trafficking women and children for sexual purposes is as lucrative in the black market as smuggling drugs.
Innocent and safe. No I'm someone else's treasure, a stranger's pleasure, smothered in shame. So come with drugs, but I'm not numb. All I feel is pain. Is this all